They thought they were pulling an ordinary black man out of an old pickup truck, but before sundown, those same officers would be standing in a briefing room under his command. Red and blue lights flashed across the wet county road outside Fort Redstone, bleeding over the hood of a black pickup that had been pulled to the shoulder less than half a mile from the base gate. Colonel Marcus Hale stood beside the driver's door with both hands visible, his dark field jacket damp from the morning mist, his boots planted steady on the gravel, and his face calm in a way that made Officer Brent Maddox even angrier. Maddox was the kind of cop who mistook obedience for respect and silence for fear. He stood close enough for his body camera to catch every word, one hand resting near his belt, his pale face tight with suspicion as he looked Marcus up and down like the man's skin, truck, and quiet voice were enough evidence for guilt. "I told you to step away from the vehicle," Maddox snapped. Marcus did exactly that, slow and controlled, not because he was afraid, but because discipline had been trained into him long before this roadside ever existed. "Officer, I am complying," he said. "I would like the reason for this stop stated clearly on record." Maddox gave a short laugh and glanced at his younger partner, Officer Kyle Raines, who stood near the passenger side looking less certain than he wanted to appear. "You hear that? He wants everything on record now." Marcus did not blink. "Yes." That single word landed harder than an argument. Inside the truck, a sealed military folder rested on the passenger seat beside a phone buzzing again and again with calls from Fort Redstone Command. A small brass keychain with an old unit insignia swung from the ignition. On the dashboard, a folded American flag pin caught the police lights. Maddox saw all of it and understood none of it. He reached through the open door and picked up the military identification card Marcus had already presented, barely reading past the name before his ego decided the document could not matter. "A lot of men claim they served," Maddox said. "That does not mean you get special treatment around here." Marcus kept his voice even. "I did not ask for special treatment. I asked why I was stopped." Raines shifted his weight, eyes flicking to the ID, then to the folder, then to the security camera mounted high on a pole near the base access road. Maddox ignored the camera. He ignored the green military decal on the windshield. He ignored the calmness of a man who had spent decades leading people through rooms far more dangerous than this shoulder of highway. Instead, Maddox stepped closer and said the sentence that would follow him all the way to internal affairs. "You people always have a story." The mist seemed to pause around them. Marcus looked at Maddox, then at the blinking red light on the body camera. His silence was not fear. It was discipline. "Officer," he said quietly, "document exactly what you just said." Maddox smiled, thinking he still owned the moment. "You are not in charge here." Marcus looked past him toward the Fort Redstone gate, where another camera was already watching, where military police had already been notified, where a briefing room was waiting for a commander who was now 10 minutes late. "Not here," Marcus said. "Not yet." Maddox did not understand the warning. He only heard defiance. So he ordered Marcus to turn around, claimed the stop was now an investigation, and reached for a pair of cuffs while the dashcam recorded, the body cam recorded, the base camera recorded, and a woman at the gas station across the road quietly lifted her phone. Every second, every word, every false assumption was becoming evidence. Officer Brent Maddox thought he was teaching a black veteran his place on the side of the road. He had no idea he was about to report to that same veteran before the day was over. 90 minutes before the red and blue lights painted the wet road outside Fort Redstone, Marcus Hale stood alone in the kitchen of his small brick house on the edge of Huntsville, Alabama, listening to coffee drip into an old steel pot while the morning news murmured softly from the counter. The house was neat in the way military homes often are, not fancy, not empty, just orderly enough that every object seemed to know why it had been placed there. A pair of polished brown boots sat by the door. A folded field jacket hung over a chair. On the wall near the hallway was a framed photograph of a younger Marcus in dress uniform, standing beside soldiers whose faces carried the exhausted pride of people who had learned trust under pressure. Beside it was a newer photograph of his daughter, Lieutenant Naomi Hale, wearing her Navy uniform with the same steady eyes he had tried to teach her to carry into every room. Marcus looked at that picture for a moment longer than usual. He did not smile widely. He rarely did in the morning. But something softened in his face, a quiet father's pride that no rank could improve. At 54, Marcus Hale moved with the controlled economy of a man who had spent decades learning not to waste energy. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, with warm dark brown skin, close-cropped gray at the temples, and eyes that noticed details before anyone told him they mattered. He did not rush, but nothing about him seemed slow. He poured his coffee, checked the latch on the back door, turned off the kitchen light though daylight had not fully arrived, and placed one slice of dry toast on a napkin because he knew from experience that important days were easier to face with something in the stomach. On the table beside him lay a sealed folder marked for interagency security briefing, a base access packet, and a handwritten note from his assistant reminding him that local law enforcement officers were scheduled to report to Fort Redstone at 1500 hours. Marcus read the note once, folded it, and tucked it into the folder. He had been asked to lead the briefing because Fort Redstone had recently tightened coordination procedures after several misunderstandings near restricted access roads. Civilian police, military police, county deputies, and base security were supposed to leave that room with one shared understanding: authority was only useful when it was disciplined. Marcus believed that. He had believed it in desert command centers, in family notification rooms, in late-night calls with frightened young soldiers, and in every meeting where someone confused a uniform with character. That morning, he could have worn his dress uniform. It would have made people stand straighter when he entered the room. It would have made every gate guard salute before seeing his face. But Marcus chose a plain dark field jacket, jeans, and work boots because before the briefing he wanted to drive the outer road near the south access point himself, quietly, without ceremony. Reports had mentioned confusion about the boundary between county road and restricted route, and Marcus did not like signing off on maps he had not seen with his own eyes. He believed leaders should inspect the ground before giving instructions about it. He also believed power showed its truth best when no one was watching. His phone buzzed once on the counter. A message from Lieutenant Dana Brooks appeared. "Good morning, sir. Briefing room confirmed. Local department expected at 1500. Captain Doyle requested 5 seats." Marcus typed back, "Acknowledged. I will review South Access before arrival. Make sure legal liaison has the updated jurisdiction memo." He placed the phone in his pocket, lifted the sealed folder, and paused at the hallway mirror. The man looking back at him did not look like a man seeking attention. He looked like someone who had learned how much could go wrong when attention came before judgment. His left hand adjusted the collar of his jacket. His right thumb brushed an old challenge coin on the table, one given to him by a unit that had survived a bad year overseas. He did not carry it for luck. He carried it to remember names. Men like Marcus did not need to announce what they had survived. It lived in the way they stood when rooms became loud. It lived in the way their voices lowered instead of rose. It lived in the way they noticed exits, cameras, hands, weather, road shoulders, tone, and timing. Outside, the morning mist hung low over the neighborhood, turning streetlights into pale circles. Marcus stepped onto the porch and locked the door behind him. His black pickup truck waited in the driveway, older than most vehicles assigned to men in his position, with a small dent near the rear bumper and a faint scrape along the passenger side. It had belonged to his father, Elijah Hale, a Vietnam veteran who had taught Marcus 2 lessons before teaching him how to change oil: never let another man's ignorance decide your conduct, and never mistake calm for surrender. The truck smelled faintly of leather, engine oil, and the cedar blocks his father used to keep behind the seat. Marcus placed the folder carefully on the passenger seat, slid his military identification into his wallet, set his coffee in the cup holder, and started the engine. The dashboard lights came alive softly. A small brass keychain with his old unit insignia swung beneath the ignition. He sat for one breath before backing out, the way he always did, scanning mirrors, checking the street, noting a neighbor's porch light still on across the road. His neighbor, Mrs. Bell, lifted a hand from behind her screen door. Marcus lowered his window. "Morning, Colonel," she called. "Morning, ma'am," he answered. "Your trash bin is still by the curb. Want me to bring it up before I go? You are already dressed to conquer the world. A trash bin is still within my authority." She laughed, and he stepped out long enough to roll the bin back beside her fence. He did not do it because he was humble in a decorative way. He did it because responsibility did not become smaller just because a man had a title. When he got back into the truck, his phone buzzed again. Dana calling this time. He let it ring once, then answered through the truck speaker. "Hail. Good morning, sir. Sorry to bother you before coffee has done its work. Too late. Coffee has reported for duty." Dana chuckled. The chief's office confirmed attendance. "Officer Roster just came through. Captain Doyle is bringing Maddox and Rains." Marcus's eyes shifted briefly to the road ahead as he turned out of the neighborhood. Maddox. That name was in the complaint summary. "Yes, sir. 2 profiling complaints, 1 excessive escalation complaint, all closed as inconclusive." Marcus did not speak for a moment. A school bus passed in the opposite lane, yellow lights blinking through mist. "Make sure those summaries are included in the sealed packet," he said. "We are not there to embarrass anyone, but we are not there to pretend patterns do not exist." "Understood." "And Dana?" "Yes, sir. Today is about standards, not revenge." "Yes, sir." He ended the call and drove toward the South Access Road. The county highway was quiet, bordered by pines, gas stations, storage lots, and the distant fencing of Fort Redstone. The base was not fully visible from every stretch of road, but Marcus knew where the cameras were, where jurisdiction changed, where civilian traffic accidentally drifted too close to restricted signage, and where a nervous officer could turn confusion into accusation if ego got there before training. He drove 5 miles under the speed limit, not because he was afraid of being stopped, but because wet roads deserved respect. At a red light near a gas station, he watched a young mother struggle with a stroller at the curb. He waited through the first green until she crossed fully, ignoring the horn that tapped once behind him. His face remained calm. The horn stopped. Marcus had spent a lifetime learning that the loudest person in a moment was not always the one with the most to lose. As he turned onto the road leading toward the outer perimeter of Fort Redstone, his phone buzzed again from the passenger seat, then again. Dana, probably checking his arrival time. He let it ring because the road curved sharply there and the mist had thickened. The sealed folder shifted slightly but stayed in place. A sign ahead read Fort Redstone South Access, authorized entry beyond gate only. Marcus was not at the gate yet. He was still on a public county road, exactly where he was supposed to be, inspecting the approach before briefing the officers who were supposed to understand it. In the rearview mirror, a police cruiser appeared 2 car lengths behind him. Marcus noticed it immediately. He did not tense. He did not speed up. He did not slow down in a way that invited suspicion. He simply continued driving, turn signal steady, hands relaxed at 10 and 2. The cruiser followed through the next curve. Then the lights came on. Red and blue flashed across the wet road, bouncing off the rear window of his father's truck. Marcus exhaled once, guided the pickup onto the shoulder, and parked with enough room for the officer to approach safely. He rolled down his window, turned off the engine, placed both hands where they could be seen, and looked ahead at the misty line of the base fence. His face did not change. He had done nothing wrong. He also knew that doing nothing wrong did not always protect a black man on the side of an American road. His calm was not innocence alone. It was training, memory, discipline, and a promise to himself that no one else's fear would write his behavior for him. Behind him, 2 car doors opened. Boots hit wet gravel. Marcus waited, steady as the gate cameras watched from a distance, and the sealed folder on the passenger seat held the names of the very officers now walking toward his truck. Officer Brent Maddox started his morning at the Huntsville County Police Precinct with his boots on a chair, a paper cup of gas station coffee in his hand, and the kind of confidence that grows when a man has been protected from consequences for too long. The briefing room smelled like stale coffee, rain-soaked jackets, and printer toner. A television in the corner played muted local news while officers came and went, checking radios, grabbing keys, joking about the weather. Maddox leaned back near the window with his duty belt heavy at his waist and his sunglasses hooked into the front of his uniform shirt, even though the sun had not fully broken through the mist outside. He was 38 years old, pale-skinned, square-jawed, broad through the chest, with close-cut blonde hair and eyes that looked at people as if every conversation was already a challenge. He liked the weight of the badge. He liked the way civilians lowered their voices when he stepped close. He liked the way young officers watched him, unsure whether to admire him or fear becoming his next target. Officer Kyle Raines stood near the coffee machine, younger by 7 years, still neat in his uniform, still trying to decide what kind of cop he wanted to become. Raines had not joined the department to bully anyone. At least, that was what he told himself. But he had learned quickly that silence was easier than correction when Maddox was in the room. Maddox was not the highest-ranking officer in the precinct, but he had the loudest certainty, and in small systems, loud certainty often passes for leadership. Fort Redstone again, Maddox muttered, tossing a printed notice onto the table. 3 hours this afternoon so military brass can teach us how to do our jobs. Raines picked up the notice. It listed selected officers scheduled for an interagency command briefing at 1500 hours, hosted at Fort Redstone Joint Training Base. Captain Doyle had circled Maddox and Raines in blue ink. It is required, Raines said carefully. After the access road complaints. Maddox gave him a look. Do not start sounding like internal affairs before 9 in the morning. A few officers chuckled. Raines smiled weakly and looked back at the paper. The notice mentioned base jurisdiction, veteran identification, coordination procedures, and conduct standards during traffic stops near restricted routes. Maddox hated every word of it. He believed streets belonged to the people who patrolled them, and he believed anyone questioning his judgment was really questioning his authority. He especially hated the phrase conduct standards. It sounded, to him, like a polite way of saying some civilian somewhere had complained loudly enough to make leadership nervous. The truth was that several civilians had complained, and not without reason. Maddox had a file. Not a criminal file, not yet, but a personnel file thick enough that Captain Doyle kept it in a bottom drawer instead of on his desk. 2 complaints alleged racial profiling during traffic stops. One complaint came from a black college student who said Maddox searched his car after claiming he smelled something suspicious, then found nothing and sent him away without apology. Another came from a retired nurse who said Maddox followed her from a pharmacy parking lot and accused her of driving a vehicle that did not look registered to her neighborhood. A third complaint described unnecessary escalation with a delivery driver near the industrial park, a stop that ended with a supervisor smoothing everything over because the body camera did not capture the beginning clearly. Every time, Maddox wrote reports that sounded cleaner than the roadside felt. Every time, he used words like non-compliant, evasive, furtive, agitated. Those words had saved him more than once. They were soft gloves for hard prejudice. Captain Victor Doyle knew this. He was not an evil man in the dramatic way people expect from villains, but he was the kind of supervisor who valued a quiet department more than a truthful one. He had told Maddox to tone it down, to keep his camera on, to avoid language that gave people ammunition. But Doyle also liked Maddox's arrest numbers, liked his confidence in tense neighborhoods, liked how he could be sent into rough situations without hesitation. So the complaints became coaching notes. The coaching notes became warnings. The warnings became forgotten whenever Maddox brought in numbers that made monthly reports look strong. That was how false power grows. Not from one bad decision, but from a dozen people deciding it is easier not to stop it. At 8:20, Doyle stepped into the briefing room with a folder under his arm. The room quieted enough to look respectful. Officer Brent Maddox reached the driver's window with his shoulders squared and his chin slightly raised, already wearing the expression of a man who had decided the stop was justified before he found a reason. The mist clung to his uniform and gathered in tiny beads along the brim of his hat. Behind him, the cruiser lights flashed red and blue across the wet pavement, across the black pickup's tailgate, across the gray fencing that marked the outer edge of Fort Redstone land in the distance. Marcus Hale sat behind the wheel with the engine off, the window lowered, and both hands resting clearly at the top of the steering wheel. He did not reach for anything. He did not turn suddenly. He did not ask the question in an angry tone, though he had every right to know why he had been stopped. He simply looked at Maddox and said, "Good morning, officer." Maddox did not return the greeting. He leaned slightly toward the window and looked around the cab first, not at Marcus's face, but at the old field jacket, the sealed folder on the passenger seat, the brass keychain, the travel mug, the phone buzzing silently near the center console. His eyes paused on the folder longer than necessary. License, registration, proof of insurance. Marcus nodded once. "Yes, officer. My wallet is in my left jacket pocket. Registration and insurance are in the glove compartment. May I reach for them?" The answer was correct, careful, and respectful. That was exactly why it irritated Maddox. People he expected to control were easier to handle when they fumbled, argued, moved too fast, or gave him a reason to raise his voice. Marcus gave him nothing except compliance. Slowly, Maddox said. Marcus retrieved his wallet with 2 fingers, removed his driver's license, then opened the glove compartment and took out the registration and insurance card. He placed everything on the window ledge instead of handing it directly into Maddox's space. It was a small detail, but it showed experience. It showed a man who knew how roadside fear could be manufactured from innocent movement. Maddox picked up the documents and glanced at them. Marcus Hale. "Yes, officer." "This your truck?" "Yes." "Registered to an Elijah Hale." Marcus's eyes softened slightly, but his voice stayed steady. "It was my father's truck. The title transfer is current. Registration should reflect the family trust notation on the second line." Maddox looked again, annoyed to find the explanation already supported by the paper in his hand. Kyle Raines stood near the passenger side, looking through the front windshield from a respectful distance. He noticed the sealed folder on the passenger seat, marked with official military formatting, and the base access packet beneath it. He noticed the driver's hands still visible. He noticed the calm. Something about the stop felt thinner by the second. Maddox, however, continued searching for weight to add to it. "You know where you are?" he asked. Marcus looked ahead toward the road sign. County Road 18, South Approach to Fort Redstone Access Corridor. Maddox's eyes narrowed. "That is a very specific answer. It is the road I am driving on." "You always talk like that." Marcus let the insult pass. "I try to be accurate." Maddox gave a short laugh and looked back at Raines as if accuracy were suspicious. "Where are you headed?" "Fort Redstone." "For what?" "A scheduled meeting." "What kind of meeting?" Marcus paused just long enough to choose the safest version of the truth. "An interagency briefing." Maddox straightened, almost amused. "You attending a briefing?" "Yes." "At the base?" "Yes." "In that truck?" Marcus looked at him, calm but clear. "This truck is legally registered, insured, and roadworthy." Maddox's jaw tightened because Marcus had answered the implication, not just the question. "I did not ask you all that." "No, officer. But your tone suggested it." Raines looked down for a moment. That answer was not disrespectful. It was too controlled to call disrespectful. But Maddox heard it as a challenge because it did not bend. He looked again at the license, then at Marcus, then toward the sealed folder. "You military?" Marcus reached slowly into his wallet and removed a military identification card, holding it where Maddox could take it without alarm. "Yes, officer." Maddox took the card. The body camera on his chest was blinking now, though it had missed the first seconds of the stop. He glanced at the ID without reading it the way a careful officer should have. He saw the photograph, the name, the seal, the rank field, but his mind had already decided that the man in the old truck did not match the authority printed on the card. "A lot of people carry military-looking cards around here," Maddox said. Marcus's eyes shifted to the body camera. "That is an official identification. I will decide what is official during my stop. You can verify it through Fort Redstone security or military police." The suggestion was reasonable. It was also the last thing Maddox wanted, because verification would end the performance before he had won it. "Do not tell me how to do my job." Marcus did not sigh, though he wanted to. He had been in enough command rooms to know that pride becomes loudest right before it becomes dangerous. "I am not telling you how to do your job. I am offering a way to confirm the document. You think I cannot spot a fake? I think verification protects everyone." Maddox leaned closer. "You got an answer for everything, do you not?" Marcus looked at him evenly. "I have answers for what you have asked." That was the moment Maddox decided the stop had become personal. Not because Marcus had resisted. Not because he had raised his voice. Not because he had failed to provide documents. He had done everything properly. But his calm made Maddox feel watched, measured, and smaller than the badge on his chest. Maddox stepped back and looked toward Rains. "Check the plate again." Rains returned to the cruiser, though he had already seen enough to know the plate was not the issue. Maddox kept Marcus's license and military identification in his hand. "Why were you driving below the speed limit?" "Wet road, reduced visibility." "You were going 15 miles under." "I was going 5 miles under." "You calling me a liar?" Marcus's hands remained on the wheel. "No. I am correcting the number." Maddox's lips tightened. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus looked at him for the first time with something close to concern. "For what reason?" "Because I told you to." "Am I being detained beyond the traffic stop?" Maddox smiled without warmth. "You are whatever I say you are until I am done figuring out what you are doing out here." The sentence hung between them, and the dashcam took it in. So did the body camera. So did the security camera high near the access road, its lens aimed down the wet shoulder. Across the street, Nora Whitaker stood beside the gas pump with her phone half raised, pretending to check a message while she watched the exchange. Marcus noticed her in the side mirror. He noticed the camera pole. He noticed Rains looking back from the cruiser with discomfort on his face. He noticed the sealed folder on the passenger seat and the corner of the jurisdiction memo beneath it. Every detail mattered now because Maddox was moving from inquiry to control. "Officer," Marcus said, "I will comply with lawful instructions. I am asking that you state the basis for ordering me out." Maddox laughed under his breath. "There it is. Lawful instructions. You one of those roadside lawyers?" "No, then quit acting like one." Marcus's voice stayed low. "I am acting like a citizen who understands that records matter." Maddox's eyes flicked to the body camera, then back. "You keep bringing up records. Because you are making one." Rains returned from the cruiser before Maddox could answer. "Plate comes back clear," he said. "Registration valid. No warrants." Maddox did not look pleased. "What about the ID?" Rains hesitated. "It appears to be military." "Appears." Maddox seized the word. "Exactly." Marcus turned his head slightly toward Rains. "Officer, Fort Redstone security can confirm my identity in less than 2 minutes." Maddox stepped between them as if Marcus had tried to recruit his partner. Do not talk to him. You talk to me. Then please verify it. I said step out. Marcus held Maddox's gaze, then nodded once. I am going to unbuckle my seatbelt and open the door. Move slow. I will. Marcus unbuckled, opened the door carefully, and stepped onto the wet gravel. He was taller than Maddox expected. Not aggressive, not looming, simply upright, broad-shouldered, and steady, with the natural bearing of someone who had stood in formation before most men learned how to command a room. Maddox noticed it and disliked it immediately. Authority recognizes authority, even when ego refuses to name it. Marcus closed the truck door halfway, leaving it open enough to show he was not hiding anything. Face the truck. Marcus turned toward the door. May I ask whether you are issuing a citation? You may ask whatever you want. Does not mean I care. Then I am asking for your badge number. Maddox stepped closer. You will get it when I decide you need it. Marcus looked toward the body camera again. Officer has declined to provide badge number upon request. Raines looked sharply at Marcus, not with anger, but with the stunned awareness that the man knew exactly how to build a clean record without raising his voice. Maddox's face hardened. You think you are smart. Marcus did not answer that. I think this stop can still be handled professionally. It was professional until you started performing. I have not performed. You have been talking down to me since I walked up. Marcus turned his head just enough to meet his eyes. No, officer. I have been speaking clearly. That was the insult Maddox could not tolerate because it was true. He held up the military ID in Marcus's line of sight. Maybe you served. Maybe you did not. Maybe this is real. Maybe it is not. But out here, that does not make you special. Marcus's expression did not change. I never said it did. Good. Then you will stand there while I figure out why a man with military paperwork is creeping around a restricted approach road in an old truck. Raines shifted. Maddox, the road is public until the gate. Maddox turned on him. Did I ask? Raines fell silent. Marcus saw it then, the pattern in miniature. A man misusing authority in front of another man too unsure to stop him. That was how systems learned to look away. Maddox reached into the truck and lifted the sealed folder from the passenger seat. Marcus's voice sharpened for the first time, not loud, but unmistakably different. Officer, do not open or mishandle that folder. Maddox smiled, pleased to have finally found something that affected him. Now we are getting nervous. No. I am warning you that those are federal briefing materials. Federal briefing materials, Maddox repeated mockingly. Sure. You can verify that with base command. I told you not to tell me what to do. Marcus looked at the folder in Maddox's hand, then at the body camera. Officer, please document that you removed sealed military materials from my vehicle after I advised you what they were. Maddox stared at him. The mist gathered on the folder's edge. Somewhere behind them, a truck passed slowly, its driver looking toward the flashing lights. Nora Whitaker's phone was fully raised now. Raines saw it but said nothing. Maddox saw it too and raised his voice, not because it was necessary, but because he wanted the audience to know who held power. You are not in charge of this stop, Mr. Hale. Marcus stood still, hands visible, boots planted on wet gravel, eyes calm. I understand what you believe. Maddox stepped closer, folder in one hand, Marcus's ID in the other. What is that supposed to mean? Marcus looked past him. For one brief second toward the Fort Redstone camera, then back. It means I am giving you every chance to correct it. Maddox laughed, and that laugh became the turning point. Because from that moment forward, he was no longer investigating. He was escalating to protect his pride. He told Raines to call in the stop as suspicious activity near restricted access. He described the driver as argumentative, even though Marcus had not raised his voice once. He said the military identification required verification, though he had refused the easiest way to verify it. He placed the sealed folder on the hood of the truck as if it were evidence of a crime instead of preparation for a briefing he himself was scheduled to attend. Marcus watched it all without flinching. His silence was not fear. It was discipline. And Maddox, mistaking discipline for defiance, decided he would make the stop bigger than it ever had to be. Maddox made the stop bigger because his pride needed a crime to justify the way he had already treated Marcus Hale. The county road remained quiet except for the soft hiss of rain on asphalt, the low pulse of the cruiser lights, and the radio static coming from the police vehicle behind them. Marcus stood beside his father's truck with his hands visible, his boots planted on wet gravel, his dark field jacket gathering mist at the shoulders. The sealed military folder now lay on the hood of the pickup where Maddox had placed it, its edge exposed to the damp air. Marcus had warned him not to mishandle it. Maddox had smiled because the warning sounded, to him, like fear. Men like Maddox often confuse a boundary with a bluff. He turned slightly toward Rains and raised his voice enough for the dashcam, bodycam, and the woman recording at the gas station to catch him clearly. Dispatch, Unit 12. I have one male subject detained near the Fort Redstone South Access Corridor. Possible suspicious activity, possible misuse of military identification, and questionable federal paperwork in the vehicle. Marcus looked at the blinking red light on Maddox's body camera. Officer, that statement is inaccurate. Maddox lowered the radio and stepped closer. You do not get to edit my report from the roadside. I am correcting a false record while it is being made. False record, Maddox repeated, laughing without humor. You hear that, Rains? He thinks he is internal affairs now. Rains did not laugh. He stood near the passenger side, watching the folder on the hood, the military identification still in Maddox's hand, and Marcus standing completely still. Something about the scene felt like a training video played backward, a list of things not to do unfolding in real time. Maddox, Rains said quietly, we can call base security and verify the ID. Maddox turned on him. I did not ask you for a legal seminar. Marcus did not move. Your partner is suggesting the proper verification channel. Do not talk to him. Then verify it yourself. Maddox's pale face tightened. You keep giving instructions like you are somebody. Marcus held his gaze. Everyone is somebody, officer. That answer made Maddox angrier than an insult would have, because it refused to accept the smaller place he was trying to assign. He looked Marcus up and down again, lingering on the old jacket, the worn truck, the plain clothes. You expect me to believe you are headed to some classified briefing looking like that? Marcus's voice stayed even. I said interagency briefing. I did not say classified. That folder says official. Official does not always mean classified. Now you are teaching vocabulary. I am trying to prevent you from making this worse. Maddox stepped close enough that Marcus could smell coffee on his breath. You do not warn me. You answer me. Marcus's eyes shifted briefly toward the base camera mounted high near the access road, then back to Maddox. I have answered every lawful question you asked. Maddox looked toward the gas station and noticed Nora Whitaker now standing openly with her phone raised. She was a middle-aged woman in a rain jacket, holding her device with both hands, not hiding anymore. She had seen enough to know the stop had stopped being ordinary. Maddox pointed at her. Ma'am, put that phone down. Nora called across the wet road, I am on public property. You are interfering with the police. Investigation. I am standing by a gas pump. Marcus said nothing, but Maddox heard judgment in the silence. He spun back toward him. You think this is funny? No, you think because somebody is filming, you can perform. Officer, I have not raised my voice once. That is the problem, Maddox snapped. You are trying to play calm so you can make us look bad. The words revealed more than he intended. Rains looked down. Nora kept recording. A truck slowed as it passed, then continued when Rains waved it on. The road, the gate, the gas station, and the cameras had become an audience Maddox could feel but not control. His answer was to increase control over the one person he believed he still could. Turn around and place your hands on the hood. Marcus looked at the folder lying there. The folder is on the hood. Move it. You placed it there. Then move it with 2 fingers and put your hands on the hood. Marcus took one careful step forward, picked up the folder by its dry corner, and held it away from the wet metal. Where would you like me to place it? Maddox smirked. Now he is worried about paperwork. Marcus's jaw moved once, but his voice remained controlled. Those documents are not personal property. They relate to a scheduled coordination briefing involving your department. Maddox laughed again, louder this time. My department? You hear that? Now his fake briefing includes us. It does. Sure it does. You are scheduled to attend at 1500 hours. The sentence should have stopped Maddox. Instead, it irritated him because it sounded too specific to dismiss and too inconvenient to accept. Rains looked at Marcus sharply. How do you know that? Marcus kept his eyes on Maddox. Because the roster was sent this morning. Maddox's face tightened. Put your hands on the truck. Officer, you can confirm everything I am saying with one call. Hands on the truck. Marcus looked at the wet hood, then at the folder in his hand. His breathing stayed steady. He placed the folder on the windshield edge where it would be less exposed, then set his palms on the hood, fingers spread, not because Maddox had earned obedience, but because the record mattered more than ego. The metal was cold under his hands. Rain beaded between his knuckles. Maddox moved behind him and began a pat-down that was more about dominance than safety. Marcus did not resist. He did not flinch. He did not give Maddox the excuse he was searching for. No weapons, Maddox muttered. No contraband, Marcus said. Nobody asked you. I am documenting the result. Maddox leaned closer. I said nobody asked you. Rains watched from the passenger side, his discomfort hardening into guilt. He knew the license was clean. He knew the plate was clear. He knew the road was public before the gate. He knew the military ID looked real. He knew Maddox was writing a story first and searching for facts second. But knowing a thing and stopping it are different moral acts, and Rains had not yet found the courage to cross that line. Maddox walked to the open driver's door and looked inside again. Why is base command calling your phone? He asked. Marcus turned his head slightly but kept his hands on the hood. That is not unusual. For who? For me. And who are you supposed to be? My identification is in your hand. Maddox looked down at the card again, this time allowing his eyes to brush over the rank field but not long enough to let the truth enter. Colonel. The word was there. His pride simply refused to read it honestly. Cards can be printed. Not this one. You got a lot of confidence for someone standing on the side of the road. Marcus's voice remained low. My confidence is not the issue. Your verification is. Maddox pulled the phone from the console before Marcus could object. Marcus's voice sharpened again. Officer, do not search my phone without lawful authority. I am checking why a suspicious subject near restricted access is getting repeated calls from a military installation. You can see the caller ID without opening the phone. You do not set the rules here. Maddox looked at the screen as it buzzed again. Lieutenant Dana Brooks. He read the name aloud with a mocking tone. Dana Brooks. That your handler? Marcus did not answer the insult. She is an officer at Fort Redstone. Convenient. It is accurate. Maddox set the phone on the roof of the truck, just out of Marcus's reach, another small act meant to remind him that even his own property depended on police permission now. Marcus looked at the phone, then at the body camera. Officer has removed my phone from the vehicle and placed it on the roof after being told the caller is attached to Fort Redstone Command. Maddox turned slowly. Keep narrating. Please. Makes you sound real stable. Nora's phone remained trained on them. Across the road, the gas station clerk had come to the window. A second customer near the air pump had stopped filling a tire and begun watching. Maddox felt the watching and hated it. He reached into the truck again and pulled out the base access packet beneath the folder. What is this? Visitor and jurisdiction material for today's briefing. You said you were going to the base. Why would you need visitor material if you belong there? Because the packet is for the officers attending. Maddox smiled like he had caught him. So you are carrying packets for police officers? Yes. And you expect me to believe that? I expect you to verify it. Maddox waved the packet toward Rains. He expects me to verify it. He expects us to believe he is just driving around with police briefing packets and military paperwork because he is important. Marcus looked over his shoulder. I did not say important. Maddox's eyes narrowed. You are acting like it. No. I am acting like the truth can be checked. The radio crackled before Maddox could respond. Dispatch came through with a measured voice. Unit 12, confirm status. Any wants or warrants on the driver? Rains pressed his shoulder mic. Dispatch, driver's license clear, registration valid, no warrants. Maddox shot him a look. Then he grabbed his own radio. Dispatch, be advised, the subject is being verbally evasive and may be misrepresenting military credentials. We are continuing investigation. Marcus turned his head fully now, hands still on the hood. I have not been evasive. Maddox pointed at him. Face forward. You are making a false statement on recorded radio. Face forward. Marcus faced forward. His silence was still. Not fear. It was strategy, discipline, and a refusal to let Maddox drag the encounter into anger. The mist thickened around the road. The folder's corner darkened with moisture. The phone on the roof kept buzzing. Each ignored call from Dana Brooks widened the gap between what Maddox thought he controlled and what was already moving beyond him. At Fort Redstone, Lieutenant Dana Brooks stood in the operations office looking at the unanswered calls on her screen. She was 34, sharp-eyed, precise, and loyal to procedure because she had seen what happened when people relied on personalities instead of records. Marcus was never late without a reason. He did not ignore command calls without a reason. When her third call went unanswered, she looked at the location map used for official base vehicles and authorized command travel. Marcus's truck was not a government vehicle, but the South Access security feed showed a black pickup stopped near the county shoulder and a police cruiser behind it. Dana leaned closer to the monitor. Pull camera 3, she said to the security specialist. The screen changed. The image was distant, but clear enough. Marcus Hale standing with hands on the hood, local police around him, folder on the windshield edge. Dana's expression changed instantly. Start recording archive. Mark timestamp. Notify base legal and military police watch desk. Back on the roadside, Maddox still believed the scene belonged to him. He had not noticed the base camera adjust slightly. He had not noticed Rain's glance toward it. He had not noticed that every additional claim he made on the radio was now being preserved by people trained to treat records like weapons against confusion. He reached for the folder again. Marcus spoke before he touched it. Officer, I am advising you for the third time not to expose those materials to Rain or treat them as criminal evidence without cause. Maddox picked it up anyway, pinching it by the top as if it were something dirty. You hear how he talks, he said to Rains. Like we work for him. Maybe we should confirm, Rain said. Maybe you should stop saying that. Maddox placed the folder back on the hood. Closer to the wet edge this time. Rainwater began to gather near the seal. Marcus saw it and took one slow breath. The folder could be reprinted. The materials could be dried. That was not the point. The point was that Maddox had been told what the folder was and had chosen disrespect because he believed disrespect was safer when aimed at a black man standing alone. "Officer," Marcus said, "I am asking you to protect those documents from the weather." Maddox leaned toward his face. "I am asking you to stop pretending you are in charge. Those two requests are not equal." Raines closed his eyes for half a second. Maddox's face hardened. "You know what? I am done with the word games." He reached behind his belt and took out handcuffs, letting them hang visibly in his hand. He did not move to apply them yet. He let Marcus see them. He let Nora's camera see them. He let Raines see them. It was a threat dressed as procedure. "You want to keep acting like a roadside commander, I can make this real simple." Marcus looked at the cuffs, then at Maddox. "I am not resisting. I am not armed. I have provided identification, registration, insurance, and a valid military ID. My license is clear. My vehicle is clear. You have been given a direct verification path. I am asking you to document why restraints are necessary." Maddox smiled slowly. "Because I do not like your attitude." The words were out before he could soften them. They hung there, clean and ugly, captured by body camera, dashcam, phone video, and base security audio from the roadside sensor pole. Raines stared at him. Nora's mouth opened slightly across the street. Marcus did not look surprised. That was what made it worse. He looked like a man watching someone finally say the quiet part clearly enough for the record. "Please repeat that," Marcus said. Maddox stepped closer. "Turn around." "Officer, please repeat the reason you just gave." "Turn around." Marcus did not move immediately. He was not refusing. He was giving the moment one last chance to correct itself. "You are escalating without cause." Maddox's voice rose. "I said turn around." Marcus turned slowly, placing his hands behind his back because he knew the camera needed to see there was no resistance. The cuffs closed around his wrists with a metallic click that seemed far too loud for a quiet wet road. Maddox exhaled like a man who had finally restored order. He did not understand that he had just crossed from misconduct into undeniable evidence. He guided Marcus a few steps away from the truck and positioned him near the front bumper, in full view of the cruiser dashcam and the base camera. "Now," Maddox said, "maybe you will learn how to listen." Marcus stood straight despite the cuffs, shoulders square, chin level, rain collecting on his jacket. "Officer Maddox," he said calmly, using the name plate he had read the moment the man approached, "you are creating a record that will outlive this road." Maddox laughed, though there was a crack of irritation beneath it. "You threatening me?" "No. I am telling you what records do." Maddox looked toward Raines. "Call it in." Subject detained, non-compliant, possible impersonation, possible unauthorized possession of military documents. Raines hesitated. He was not non-compliant. Maddox stared at him. "Call it in." Raines swallowed, then keyed the radio with the weakest version he could manage. "Dispatch, subject is detained. Continuing verification." Maddox snatched his own mic. Subject was non-compliant and argumentative. Possible impersonation of military personnel. Requesting supervisor. Marcus looked toward the Fort Redstone gate. In the distance, beyond the fence line, a white military police vehicle began moving from the security lane. It was still far away, just a shape behind mist and chain link, but Marcus saw it. He did not smile. He did not announce it. He simply stood in the rain, cuffed beside the old truck his father had left him, while the man who thought he was proving authority finished building the case against himself. Every insult had been recorded. Every ignored document had been recorded. Every false radio claim had been recorded. Every warning had been given calmly. Maddox believed the cuffs meant Marcus had lost. But Marcus knew something Maddox did not. In the military, a record is not noise. A record is accountability waiting for command. Marcus Hale had learned long ago that fear becomes more dangerous when it borrows another man's voice. That was why he did not shout when the cuffs closed around his wrists. That was why he did not twist his shoulders, did not curse, did not beg Officer Brent Maddox to see him differently. He stood near the front bumper of his father's black pickup with rain settling on his field jacket, his hands restrained behind him, his spine straight, and his eyes fixed somewhere beyond the flashing lights toward the gray line of Fort Redstone's perimeter fence. To Maddox, that stillness looked like arrogance. To Raines, it was beginning to look like training. To Nora Whitaker across the road, recording from the gas station, it looked like a man refusing to let humiliation decide his posture. But to Marcus, it was memory. Years before that wet county road, he had stood in rooms where everyone looked to him because panic had nowhere else to go. He had heard young soldiers breathe too fast before convoys rolled out. He had stood beside hospital beds and made himself speak gently to families who deserved truth without cruelty. He had sat in command centers under fluorescent lights while bad information moved faster than certainty, learning that the first person to lose control often gave control to the worst voice in the room. Marcus had earned his calm the hard way. Not from pride. Not from numbness. From discipline shaped by responsibility. In Afghanistan, long before gray touched his temples, he had led soldiers through days when every decision carried weight beyond rank. He had learned to lower his voice when others raised theirs, to ask for confirmation before reaction, to document what could later be disputed, to keep his hands visible when a room was tense, to protect records because records protected lives. Later, back in the United States, he trained officers, military police, and joint response teams on crisis negotiation and interagency command. He taught them that authority was not the right to dominate confusion, but the duty to reduce it. He taught them that a badge, a rank, a weapon, or a uniform could open a door, but only conduct decided whether a person deserved to lead once they were inside. He had seen men with polished medals make reckless decisions, and he had seen young privates with shaking hands show more honor than commanders who loved the sound of their own orders. That was why he did not worship rank, even his own. It was also why he would not allow Maddox to use power without a record. On the roadside, Maddox kept moving, too restless to notice the trap he had set for himself. He walked back to the truck, lifted Marcus's phone from the roof, watched another call from Lieutenant Dana Brooks light up the screen, then placed it back down with a show of irritation. "Your friend is persistent," he said. Marcus looked at the phone but did not answer. "She is doing her job." "And what job is that?" Maddox asked. "The one you keep preventing her from doing." Maddox gave a sharp laugh and looked at Raines. "Still talking like he runs something." Raines did not answer. His eyes had drifted again to the military identification card in Maddox's hand. The word colonel was there. The branch seal was there. The official formatting was there. He had seen fake cards before, and this did not look like one. More than that, the driver did not look like someone pretending. Pretenders usually over-explain. Marcus had explained only what was necessary, and every time Maddox pushed, Marcus narrowed the moment back to facts. That was not the behavior of a man caught in a lie. It was the behavior of a man waiting for the truth to catch up. At Fort Redstone, Lieutenant Dana Brooks stood in the operations office with one hand on the back of a chair and her eyes locked on the enlarged security feed. The camera view showed the cruiser, the black pickup, the two officers, the gas station across the road, and Colonel Hale standing restrained near the front bumper. The room around her had gone quiet in the way military rooms do when people understand that the next action must be precise. The security specialist had already archived the footage from camera 3. A second monitor showed the approach road map, where the stop was clearly still on public county pavement, not inside restricted territory. Dana took a breath and spoke without raising her voice. "Notify the watch commander. Contact base legal." Send military police to the south access corridor. Do not approach aggressively. We are preserving the record first. The young specialist nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. Dana picked up the phone again and called Marcus. It went unanswered. She watched the screen as the phone lit up on the truck roof, out of his reach. Her jaw tightened. He cannot answer because they took it from him. Another officer in the room, Captain Alicia Monroe from base security, leaned closer to the feed. That is Colonel Hale. Dana did not look away. Yes. Why is he in cuffs? Dana's voice became colder. That is the question Officer Maddox is going to answer on camera. She did not say it loudly. She did not need to. Everyone in that room knew Colonel Marcus Hale was not simply late to a meeting. He was the commanding officer scheduled to lead the meeting. The sealed folder on the hood contained the roster, complaint summaries, jurisdiction memo, and conduct standards for the very department now mishandling him on the road. But Dana also knew Marcus well enough to understand why he had not used his rank like a weapon at the first insult. He could have said the full title. He could have demanded base command. He could have spoken one sentence that might have changed Maddox's face before the cuffs came out. But Marcus believed identity should never be a shield only available to important people. If the stop was wrong, it was wrong before anyone knew he was a colonel. If the treatment was humiliating, it was humiliating before anyone read his rank. Dana respected that. It also made her angrier, because she knew exactly what kind of restraint it took for a man with real command authority to stand on a roadside and let a small officer reveal himself completely. Back beside the truck, Marcus felt the cuffs press against his wrists, but he kept his shoulders relaxed to prevent discomfort from becoming visible. His father had taught him that too, not about cuffs, but about dignity. Elijah Hale had come home from Vietnam with medals he rarely mentioned and stories he almost never told. He had worked at the Redstone machine shop for 26 years after that, repairing equipment for men who sometimes looked through him until they found out he knew more than they did. When Marcus was 17 and angry about a store clerk following him aisle by aisle, his father had taken him outside and said, "Son, do not confuse staying calm with letting it go. Sometimes calm is how you make sure the truth has no mud on it when you hand it over." Marcus had carried that sentence into every rank he ever held. Now, standing in the rain with Officer Maddox trying to turn him into a suspect, he heard his father as clearly as if the old man were sitting in the truck. Keep the truth clean. Keep your voice clean. Let the record show who brought the mud. Maddox picked up the sealed folder again and turned it over, ignoring the moisture spreading across one corner. Interagency security briefing, he read aloud with mock importance. Local law enforcement coordination. He looked at Marcus. You print this at home? Marcus looked directly at the body camera. That folder was prepared by Fort Redstone Command Staff. Command Staff, Maddox repeated. You got a whole script. No. I have a position that requires paperwork. Maddox stepped closer. And what position would that be? Marcus held his eyes. For a second, the answer sat between them, fully available and still withheld. He could end the suspense. He could say it. He could watch Maddox's confidence crack. But the reveal was not ready because Maddox was still choosing. Every man deserves a chance to step back before consequence hardens. Marcus gave him one more. Verify the identification. Maddox's mouth curled. That is not what I asked. It is the answer that protects you. Raines looked at Marcus then, really looked at him, and the sentence hit him differently. Protects you. It was not a threat. It was not panic. It was an experienced man warning a reckless one that the ground ahead was gone. Maddox heard only condescension. You think I need protection from you? No, Marcus said. From the record you are creating. Maddox turned away in irritation, but his confidence had begun to strain at the edges. He reached for his radio again. Dispatch, Unit 12. Subject continues to be verbally combative and refuses to clarify purpose near base access. Marcus spoke immediately, calm and clear. I have stated my purpose multiple times. I am scheduled for an interagency briefing at Fort Redstone. Maddox talked over him. Possible impersonation remains under investigation. Raines looked at Maddox. He did clarify. Maddox lowered the radio. What? Raines swallowed. He told us he is going to the briefing. He gave the ID. The license is clear. We should call the base. Maddox stared at his partner as if betrayal had stepped out of uniform and borrowed Raines's face. You are getting soft because he knows big words. Raines's cheeks reddened. I am saying procedure. Procedure is making sure people do not lie their way past a restricted area. Marcus turned slightly, enough to keep his voice directed toward the cameras. This is not restricted area. This is public county road before the gate. Maddox pointed at him. Quiet. Marcus faced forward again. He had made the correction. That was enough. In the distance, behind the Fort Redstone fence, the white military police vehicle moved closer along the internal access lane. Its lights were not flashing. It was not rushing. That restraint said something too. Dana had sent professionals, not noise. Marcus saw the vehicle through the mist and felt the timeline shift. The base knew. His staff knew. Legal would know within minutes. Police headquarters would be contacted through formal channels. But none of that changed what he had to do in the next 60 seconds. He still had to stand there as Marcus Hale, not as rank first, not as anger first, but as a black veteran who understood exactly what Maddox was trying to do and refused to help him do it. Nora Whitaker, across the road, kept recording. She had no idea about Marcus's rank, but she knew unfairness when she saw it. The gas station clerk had stepped outside under the awning. A truck driver at the air pump had his arms folded, watching carefully. Maddox's performance had gathered witnesses he did not want. He tried to push them back with volume. This is an active investigation, he called toward the gas station. Clear the area. Nora answered, I am staying right here. Maddox muttered something under his breath, then turned back to Marcus. You people love an audience. The sentence came out lower than the others, almost private, but the body camera was close, the dashcam microphone was open, and Marcus's calm reply made it impossible to bury. Officer, please document that statement as well. Raines closed his eyes briefly. Maddox realized too late that he had said it with the camera blinking. His face hardened, not with regret, but with resentment that the words had been caught. You know what your problem is? Maddox said. You think calm makes you innocent. Marcus looked straight ahead. No. I think evidence makes the truth harder to bury. The words quieted even the mist. Maddox had no clean answer, so he did what men like him do when truth begins to corner them. He changed the accusation. Maybe you are not impersonating military. Maybe you are misusing access materials. Maybe you are transporting restricted documents without authorization. Then verify authorization. Stop saying that. It remains the lawful solution. I said stop. Marcus stopped. Not because Maddox had won, but because silence can be sharper than repetition when every reasonable option has already been offered. Inside Fort Redstone operations, Dana Brooks watched the military police vehicle approach the gate exit. She held the phone to her ear as base legal came on the line. This is Lieutenant Brooks. We have a local law enforcement stop involving Colonel Marcus Hale on County Road 18 outside South Access. He appears restrained. Local officer has handled command briefing materials and may have made false radio claims. We are archiving base CCTV and requesting immediate coordination with Huntsville County Police Command. The legal officer asked one question. Dana answered without hesitation. Yes. Colonel Marcus Hale. Commanding officer. Back on the roadside, Marcus stood in the same steady posture, rein on his jacket, cuffs on his wrists, eyes calm. He was not weak. He was not helpless. He was a man with command authority, combat experience, crisis training, federal responsibility, and a base already moving behind him. But he did not need to announce any of that for it to be real. Power that has to scream its own name is usually borrowed. Marcus's power was quiet because it was rooted. Maddox looked at him and still saw a man he wanted to reduce. The cameras saw more. The base saw more. Raines was beginning to see more. And within minutes, Maddox would be forced to see what his pride had refused to read from the beginning. The calmest man on that road was not trying to escape authority. He was authority, waiting for procedure to arrive. The record that would destroy Brent Maddox did not come from one camera, one witness, or one dramatic confession. It came from every system he assumed was too slow, too distant, or too routine to catch him clearly. On the shoulder of County Road 18, he still believed the scene belonged to him because Marcus Hale was standing in cuffs beside the hood of an old black pickup, because Raines had not stopped him, because dispatch was hearing Maddox's voice first, and because the badge on his chest had won him too many arguments before anyone reviewed the footage. But this time, every lie had a timestamp. Every warning had a microphone. Every document had a chain of custody he was breaking in full view of people trained to preserve records. At Fort Redstone operations, Lieutenant Dana Brooks stood over the security console while Camera 3 continued recording the stop from above the South Access Road. The lens was not close enough to read lips, but it showed positions, movement, timing, and the most important truth of all, Marcus's truck had been stopped on Public County Road before the restricted gate, exactly where he had said it was. Dana pointed to the screen. Archive from the moment the cruiser entered frame. The security specialist typed quickly. Already saving, ma'am. Make a duplicate and mark it legal hold. Yes, ma'am. On another monitor, the access road map displayed the jurisdiction boundary in clean digital lines. The cruiser and truck were outside the base. That mattered because Maddox had described the stop like Marcus was creeping near. Restricted access, as if the road itself made him suspicious. Dana knew how a phrase like that cowl, the point of no return, came in the space between two approaching vehicles and one man's refusal to admit he had already lost control. Officer Brent Maddox saw the white military police vehicle moving from the direction of Fort Redstone and the county supervisor car turning onto the road from the opposite side, and for a brief second, uncertainty crossed his face. It was quick, almost invisible beneath the hard set of his jaw, but Marcus Hale saw it. Kyle Raines saw it too. Nora Whitaker's phone caught the tiny shift from confidence to calculation. Maddox understood that if the scene froze exactly as it was, the evidence would not favor him. Marcus was cuffed despite no resistance. The license was clear. The registration was valid. The military identification had not been properly verified. The folder had been handled after repeated warnings. The radio log contained words Maddox would later wish he could pull back from the air. So he did what men like him often do when the truth begins to close in. He tried to create a worse version of the truth before anyone else arrived to see the real one. Raines, Maddox said sharply, open the truck and check the center console. Raines stared at him. For what? For anything connected to these documents. Captain said not to handle anything further. Maddox stepped toward him, voice low and dangerous without needing to be loud. Captain is not on this shoulder. We are. Marcus turned his head slightly. Officer Maddox, you were instructed over recorded radio not to handle any documents further. Maddox rounded on him. You do not get to interpret orders. I am repeating what everyone heard. Quiet. This is your last chance to stop making this worse. That sentence seemed to strike Maddox harder than anger would have. It sounded calm. It sounded certain. It sounded like Marcus already knew the ending. Maddox hated that most of all. Last chance, he said, almost laughing. You are standing in cuffs on my scene. Marcus looked at the body camera. This is not your scene. It is a public road, a recorded stop, and now an interagency matter. Raines's shoulders tightened because every word Marcus said was true. Maddox's hand flexed near the notepad, then moved toward the truck door. He pulled it open wider and leaned inside, ignoring Raines's warning look, ignoring the base camera, ignoring Nora across the street, ignoring the fact that the military police vehicle was less than a minute away. He wanted something, anything, that would justify the cuffs. The center console held a pack of mints, a folded gas receipt, an old pair of reading glasses, and a small cloth pouch containing a challenge coin. Maddox picked up the pouch and shook the coin into his palm. What is this? Marcus kept his voice even. A unit coin. Looks like a badge. It is not. Looks like something someone could flash around. It is a commemorative coin. Maddox held it up toward Raines like evidence. See? This is what I am talking about. Props. Cards. Folders. A whole performance. Raines did not move closer. That is a challenge coin, Maddox. Now you are an expert. I have seen them before. You have seen one with this kind of seal. Yes. Maddox's eyes narrowed. His partner was no longer useful as a shadow, and that made him feel isolated in front of the very audience he had tried to dominate. He tossed the coin back into the truck, not hard enough to break anything, but careless enough that it clattered against the cup holder. Marcus's face did not change, but something in his eyes tightened. That coin had belonged to men who were no longer alive. Maddox could not have known that, but he could have known respect. He chose not to. Officer, Marcus said, that property has no relevance to your stated stop. Maddox closed the truck door halfway, then opened it again as if the motion itself proved authority. Everything is relevant until I say it is not. Nora called from across the road, he is not doing anything to you. Maddox turned toward her. Ma'am, if you interfere one more time, I will have you removed from the area. I am recording from a gas station, Nora answered. I heard what the captain told you. That was when Maddox realized she had captured the radio instruction clearly enough to repeat it. His face hardened. He pointed toward Raines. Go tell her to step back. Raines did not move. She is already back. Maddox stared at him. Are you refusing a lawful order? Raines swallowed. He was younger, lower in seniority, and frightened of what refusing Maddox would mean later. But he was more frightened now of what obeying him was already becoming. I am saying she is not interfering. The fracture widened. The old power Maddox depended on, the power of a younger officer nodding along, had begun to fail him in public. He looked at Marcus again and found the same calm waiting there. That calm had become unbearable. Maddox reached for his radio and spoke quickly, trying to make the official record outrun the visual one. Dispatch, Unit 12. Subject remains detained. We have located items consistent with possible impersonation and unauthorized use of military identifiers. Subject continues to challenge lawful commands. Marcus spoke immediately, voice clear, directed toward every microphone present. The item he refers to is a challenge coin from my former unit. It was removed from the center console after command instructed him not to handle further property. I have not resisted. I have not threatened anyone. I have requested verification multiple times. Maddox stepped close. Shut your mouth. The words came out raw, not procedural, not professional, not capable of being polished later. Raines flinched. Nora's phone did not. The dashcam did not. The bodycams did not. The base camera did not. Marcus looked at Maddox, and for the first time that morning, sadness crossed his face. Not fear. Not defeat. Sadness for how far a man would go to avoid admitting he was wrong. Officer Maddox, he said quietly, you are making false statements on a recorded channel. You are mishandling federal briefing materials after warning. You restrained me without a stated lawful basis. And you are now attempting to create suspicion from personal military property. Stop. Maddox stared at him as if the word itself were an insult. You do not give me orders. Then hear it as advice. I do not take advice from suspects. I am not a suspect. I am a citizen. You stopped without cause. Maddox leaned closer, voice dropping. You are whatever I write down. There it was. The final line. The philosophy beneath everything he had done. Not law. Not truth. Not safety. Paperwork as domination. A report as a weapon. Raines looked at him in disbelief. Marcus looked toward the body camera. Please document that statement. Maddox realized, half a second too late, how clearly he had said it. His pride tried to bury the mistake under motion. He grabbed the sealed folder from the windshield edge again, ignoring the moisture on the cover, and opened the top flap. Marcus's voice sharpened, controlled but unmistakable. Do not open that folder. Maddox smiled like he had finally found the nerve he wanted. Now we are getting somewhere. Do not open that folder. You afraid of what is inside? I am warning you that it contains official materials prepared for command review. Command review, Maddox repeated. You love that word. He slid out the first page just enough for the rain to dot the corner. The top sheet showed the header for Fort Redstone Joint Training Base, Interagency Conduct and Jurisdiction Briefing. Underneath, the roster page was clipped, and if he had looked carefully, he would have seen his own name printed among the officers scheduled to attend. But Maddox was not looking to understand. He was looking to accuse. You printed police names in here, he said. Why do you have officer names? Marcus looked at Raines. Because your department sent the roster. Raines stepped forward. Maddox, close it. Back up. Close the folder. I said back up. Raines did not back up immediately. That small refusal changed the whole roadside. The military police vehicle was now visible beyond the shoulder, slowing near the access gate exit. The county supervisor vehicle was close enough that its tires hissed over the wet pavement. Captain Doyle's voice came over the radio again, sharper than before. Unit 12, confirm you are not handling the documents further. Maddox froze with the folder open in his hand. The timing was devastating. Nora's video captured the open folder. Raines's camera captured it from the side. Maddox's own body camera captured his hand on the documents. Marcus stood in cuffs and answered before Maddox could shape the lie. Captain, Officer Maddox has opened the folder after your instruction not to handle documents further. Maddox swung toward him. I told you to stop talking. Captain Doyle's voice cut through the radio. Maddox, close the folder now. For 1 second, obedience was available. Maddox could still close it, step back, and wait. It would not save him completely, but it could keep the damage from becoming irreversible. Instead, he looked at Marcus and laughed under his breath. You really think everyone reports to you? Marcus held his gaze. No, good. But today, you were scheduled to report to the room that folder was prepared for. Maddox's laugh faded. What does that mean? Marcus did not answer. The military police vehicle rolled to a stop behind the cruiser, not with sirens, not with force, but with the quiet certainty of an institution that had arrived through channels, not ego. 2 military police officers stepped out and waited by their vehicle while a black woman in uniform, Lieutenant Dana Brooks, exited the passenger side. She did not rush. She took in the scene in one sweep, Marcus cuffed near the truck, Maddox holding the open folder, Raines pale beside him, Nora recording, the county supervisor car pulling in, and the base camera above them still fixed on the shoulder. Dana's face went still in a way that looked more dangerous than anger. Maddox saw the uniform and tried to recover first. "This is a county police matter. We have a subject detained near restricted access." Dana did not look at him first. She looked at Marcus. For a brief moment, respect passed between them without needing announcement. "Sir," she said, controlled and formal, "are you injured?" Maddox's eyebrows pulled together. "Sir." "Not buddy. Not subject." "Sir." Marcus answered, "No, Lieutenant." Raines's eyes widened at the word lieutenant. Maddox heard it too, but pride made him miss its meaning. "Lieutenant, you need to stand by until we finish our investigation." Dana turned to him slowly. "Officer, close that folder." Maddox lifted his chin. "I am not under your command." Marcus looked at him, rain on his face, hands still cuffed behind his back. He had warned him. Raines had warned him. Dispatch had warned him. Captain Doyle had warned him. Dana had now warned him. But Maddox's entire identity was built on the belief that backing down meant losing power. So he chose the sentence that would become the centerpiece of every review that followed. "I do not report to you people, and I do not report to him." The road went quiet. Even the rain seemed softer. Dana's eyes did not move from Maddox's face. Raines looked down. Nora whispered, "Oh my God," behind her phone. Marcus closed his eyes for a single breath, not because the word surprised him, but because they confirmed what the morning had been from the start. Dana stepped closer, voice steady. "Officer Maddox, you are currently holding official Fort Redstone Command briefing materials after being instructed not to handle them. You have restrained the commanding officer scheduled to lead your interagency briefing. You are on base security camera, police body camera, civilian video, and recorded radio." Maddox stared at her. The words commanding officer landed, but he still refused to let them settle. "No. He is claiming that." Dana looked at Raines. "You have his identification." Raines swallowed. "Maddox has it." Dana turned back. "Read the rank field." Maddox looked at the card in his hand at last, truly looked, not skimming past what his ego did not want to see. "Colonel Marcus E. Hale. Commanding Officer. Fort Redstone Joint Training Base." His face changed slowly, from irritation to confusion, from confusion to disbelief, from disbelief to the first cold edge of fear. Still, the full reveal had not yet arrived. Not publicly. Not with command confirmation. But the line had been crossed. Maddox had cuffed him. Maddox had lied over radio. Maddox had opened the folder. Maddox had used words he could not bury. Maddox had said he did not report to him while holding proof that by 3 o'clock that afternoon, in a room full of officers, he absolutely did. Captain Doyle's supervisor vehicle stopped behind the military police unit. Sergeant Alvarez stepped out first, then Doyle himself, his face tight with the look of a man seeing years of ignored warning signs become one undeniable scene. Dana remained between the folder and Marcus, her voice calm as steel. "Remove the cuffs." Maddox looked at Doyle, desperate for the old protection. Doyle did not give it. "Maddox," the captain said through the rain, "remove them now." Marcus stood still while the entire roadside watched the first piece of power slip out of Maddox's hands. The cuffs had been meant to make Marcus look small. Instead, they made every witness understand exactly how far Maddox had gone. After this, there would be no coaching note, no cleaned-up report, no closed complaint marked inconclusive. The man who thought he could write anyone into suspicion had written himself into the one record he could not escape. The reveal did not explode across County Road 18. It arrived with the quiet force of a door closing behind every excuse officer Brent Maddox had left. For several seconds, no one moved. The rain had thinned to a fine mist that clung to uniforms, truck windows, and the open folder in Maddox's hand. Marcus Hale stood beside the hood of his father's pickup, wrists still cuffed behind him, shoulders straight, face calm, while Lieutenant Dana Brooks stood between him and the officer who had spent the morning trying to reduce him to a suspect. Captain Doyle had just ordered the cuffs removed. Sergeant Alvarez stood near the supervisor vehicle, watching Maddox with a look that said the old protections were not arriving this time. Nora Whitaker kept recording from the gas station. Raines stood frozen, pale and silent, his body camera catching the moment he realized that doing nothing had still become part of the record. Maddox looked at Captain Doyle as if he had misheard him. "Captain, I said this man may be impersonating military personnel." Doyle's eyes moved from the open folder to the ID card in Maddox's other hand, then to Marcus, then back to Maddox. "Read the card out loud." Maddox stared at him. "What?" "Read it." The road fell into a deeper silence. Maddox looked down at the military identification he had dismissed, mocked, and used as a prop. For the first time, he read each field instead of letting pride blur past it. Name, Marcus E. Hale. Rank, Colonel. Assignment, Fort Redstone Joint Training Base. Position, Commanding Officer. The words seemed too heavy for his mouth. He did not say them. Dana did. "Colonel Marcus Elijah Hale," she said clearly, every syllable clean enough for body cameras, dash cams, base security, police radio, and Nora's phone. "Commanding Officer of Fort Redstone Joint Training Base. Chair of today's Interagency Security and Conduct Briefing. The briefing your department was ordered to attend at 1500 hours. Maddox's face changed slowly, as if the truth had to fight its way through every assumption he had made since the traffic lights came on. His mouth tightened first. Then his eyes dropped to the folder. Then his shoulders lost a fraction of their false height. Raines looked at the open folder and saw the roster page beneath the briefing cover, damp at one corner but readable. His own name was there. Kyle Raines. Officer Brent Maddox. Captain Victor Doyle. Assigned attendees. The meeting they had mocked that morning was not just real. It belonged to the man standing cuffed in front of them. Raines whispered, "Colonel." It was not loud, but Maddox heard it like a door slamming. Marcus did not smile. He did not turn the moment into revenge. He simply stood still while the truth did what his anger never needed to do. Dana stepped toward Maddox and held out her hand. "The folder." Maddox gripped it tighter by reflex. "This is part of my investigation." Captain Doyle's voice cut in, colder now. "There is no investigation of Colonel Hale for impersonation. There is an investigation into this stop. Hand her the folder." Maddox looked from Doyle to Dana, then to Marcus, still searching for a version of the morning where he remained in charge. "Captain, you were not here when he started challenging me." Marcus finally spoke, quiet and controlled. "I asked for the reason for the stop. I provided identification. I offered verification. I complied with instructions. Every step is recorded." Doyle's jaw tightened because he knew it was true before the footage even played. The proof was everywhere: Raines's body camera, Maddox's body camera, the cruiser dashcam, Fort Redstone's security camera, Nora's phone, dispatch audio, radio logs, call records, and the chain of instructions Maddox had ignored. Dana repeated, "The folder, officer." Maddox handed it over. The act was small, but everyone felt it. His hand released the paper, and with it, another piece of the authority he had misused. Dana closed the flap carefully, protecting the damp edge with her sleeve, then passed it to the military police sergeant behind her. "Secure this as recovered official material. Photograph condition. Note moisture exposure." The sergeant nodded and placed it inside a protective case. Maddox looked offended, as if the documents had been rescued from him instead of from the rain. Captain Doyle stepped closer. "Remove the cuffs." Maddox hesitated 1 second too long. Sergeant Alvarez spoke from behind him. "Maddox." That second voice broke the last illusion that anyone on his side would shield him in the open. Maddox reached for the cuff key, his fingers stiff. He stepped behind Marcus, and the metal clicked as the restraints opened. Marcus brought his hands forward slowly, flexing his wrists once. He did not rub them dramatically. He did not glare. He did not give Maddox the satisfaction of seeing pain turned into performance. Dana's eyes lowered briefly to the red marks at his wrists, then lifted with visible restraint. "Sir, do you need medical attention?" Marcus shook his head. "No, Lieutenant. Thank you." That single thank you, spoken from a colonel to the officer who came to verify him, landed harder than any command. It reminded everyone that real authority did not need to shout over the rain. Maddox tried one last time to rescue himself. Colonel or not, he should have identified himself clearly. Marcus turned to him then. Not sharply. Not theatrically. Just enough that the entire roadside felt the shift. "I gave you official identification. You chose not to read it. I told you how to verify it. You chose not to call. I warned you about the folder. You chose to open it. I corrected false radio statements. You chose to repeat them. My rank did not make your conduct wrong, Officer Maddox. Your conduct was wrong before you knew my rank." No one spoke. Even Doyle looked down for a moment because the sentence reached further than Maddox. It reached the system that had let him become comfortable. Dana looked toward Rains. "Officer Rains, did Colonel Hale offer verification through Fort Redstone security?" Rains swallowed. This was his own reveal too, not of power, but of conscience. "Yes, ma'am. Multiple times." Maddox turned on him. "Rains." Doyle snapped, "Do not." Rains looked at Marcus, then at Dana. He remained calm. He did not resist. "The stop was clear before we ordered him out. The license and registration were valid. I should have intervened sooner." Maddox's face darkened, but the old intimidation no longer held. Rains had spoken into his own camera, in front of military police, county supervision, and base command. The record had found a human voice. Dana nodded once, not forgiving him, but acknowledging the truth. Then her phone rang. She answered on speaker after seeing the name. "Brooks." A senior voice came through, formal and unmistakable. "This is General Whitaker from Regional Command. Confirm Colonel Hale's status." Maddox stared at the phone. Doyle straightened automatically. Dana answered, "Colonel Hale is safe, restrained no longer, standing at County Road 18 South Access. Official materials have been recovered and secured. Local command is present." The voice continued, "Colonel Hale, are you able to proceed?" Marcus looked toward the phone. "Yes, sir." "Do you wish us to elevate immediately?" Marcus paused. Maddox's eyes flickered with the first fragile hope that Marcus might make it go away. Marcus did not look at him when he answered. "Preserve all evidence. Let the review follow procedure." "Understood. We will coordinate with county leadership and base legal." The call ended. That was the final confirmation. Not just a lieutenant. Not just an ID card. Not just a folder. Regional Command itself had spoken to the man Maddox had called a suspicious subject. The power on that roadside had fully changed hands, but Marcus wore it differently than Maddox ever could. He did not need to humiliate Maddox to prove it. The facts were doing enough. Captain Doyle faced Maddox. "You are relieved from active field duty pending review. Hand your radio and duty vehicle keys to Sergeant Alvarez." Maddox stared. "Captain. Now. You are doing this in front of them?" Doyle's expression hardened. "You did all of this in front of them." Sergeant Alvarez stepped forward with one hand open. Maddox looked toward Marcus, then toward Dana, then toward Nora's phone across the road. The public road he had tried to turn into his stage had become the place where his authority was removed in daylight. He unclipped the radio slowly and handed it over. Then the cruiser keys. The metal sound of the keys dropping into Alvarez's palm was small, but it carried like a gavel. Marcus watched without satisfaction. That disappointed Maddox more than triumph would have. A man who needs others to feel small cannot understand someone who refuses to enjoy that feeling in return. Dana stepped beside Marcus. "Sir, the briefing can be delayed." Marcus looked toward the base gate, then at the wet folder case, then at the officers standing in the road. "No. The briefing should happen today." Doyle looked up. "Colonel, after what happened, we can reschedule." Marcus met his eyes. "Captain, today is exactly why it cannot be rescheduled." Doyle had no answer. The rain eased. The clouds over Fort Redstone thinned just enough for pale morning light to spread across the fence line. Marcus walked to his truck, no cuffs now, no one blocking him, no one touching his documents, and picked up his phone from the roof. 12 missed calls from Dana. 3 from base legal. 1 from regional command. He placed it in his pocket and looked once at the old challenge coin lying near the cup holder where Maddox had tossed it. He picked it up, wiped it with his thumb, and held it for a breath before putting it back into the cloth pouch. That quiet gesture hurt more than accusation. It showed everyone that Maddox had not just mishandled paperwork. He had disrespected service, memory, and a man who had given his life to command with restraint. Nora lowered her phone slightly, still recording but with tears in her eyes. Raines stood near the cruiser, ashamed and finally silent for the right reason. Maddox stood without radio, without keys, without control, staring at the colonel he had tried to make into a suspect. Marcus turned to him one last time. "Officer Maddox, the room you were ordered to report to this afternoon is under my command. You will not be there as an attendee now. You will be part of the case study." The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Maddox's face drained completely. The reveal was finished. The man he had dragged from his truck was not only a black veteran, not only a lawful driver, not only a calm citizen with a valid ID. He was the commanding officer of the base, the author of the briefing, the holder of the standard Maddox had failed in front of every camera that mattered. Power had changed hands before anyone raised their voice, and the road remembered everything. The first consequence for Officer Brent Maddox was not a speech, a headline, or a public apology. It was the quiet removal of the tools he had used to make another man feel powerless. Sergeant Alvarez stood on the wet shoulder of County Road 18 with one hand open while Maddox unclipped his radio and dropped the cruiser keys into his palm. The sound was small, just metal against metal, but everyone heard it. Marcus Hale heard it. Raines heard it. Dana Brooks heard it. Nora Whitaker's phone recorded it from across the road. The same officer who had used the radio to describe a calm black veteran as non-compliant could no longer speak through it. The same officer who had used the cruiser lights to turn a lawful driver into a roadside spectacle could no longer drive the cruiser away. Captain Doyle stepped closer, his face tight with the weight of every complaint he had treated like paperwork instead of warning. "Officer Maddox, you are relieved from active field duty pending internal review. You will not return to patrol today. You will ride with Sergeant Alvarez to headquarters. You will not contact witnesses, alter reports, delete files, or discuss this incident outside official channels." Maddox looked at him like the words were betrayal. "Captain, you cannot let them dictate department procedure." Doyle's eyes flicked toward Marcus, then back to Maddox. "They are not dictating it. Your conduct triggered it." Maddox tried to speak again, but Doyle cut him off. "And before you say another word, remember that your body camera is still recording." That warning finally did what decency, policy, and multiple commands had failed to do. Maddox closed his mouth. The silence that followed was not dignity. It was fear of the record. Marcus stood beside his truck, no longer cuffed, rubbing one wrist only once before letting his hand fall. Dana had recovered the sealed folder and placed it inside a protective case. A military police officer photographed the damp corner, the hood of the truck, the location of the folder, the position where Marcus had been restrained, and the security camera line of sight from Fort Redstone. Raines gave his first statement on scene, voice uneven but clear. He confirmed that Marcus had provided license, registration, insurance, and military identification. He confirmed the plate came back clean. He confirmed Marcus had offered verification through Fort Redstone more than once. He confirmed Maddox had described him as non-compliant after he had complied. Each confirmation was another door closing on the version Maddox intended to write. At county headquarters, the internal affairs process began before lunch. The evidence arrived in layers: Maddox's body camera, which showed the late activation, the insults, the ignored warnings, the folder being handled, and the cuffing; Raines's body camera, which captured the earlier contact and his own hesitation; the cruiser dashcam, which proved the truck pulled over safely and Marcus made no sudden movement; the dispatch audio, which preserved Maddox's false claims in real time; the computer-aided dispatch notes, including the discrepancy flagged by dispatcher Cheryl Klein; Nora Whitaker's phone video, which showed the broader scene from public property; the gas station security footage, which confirmed Marcus's compliance from another angle; Fort Redstone Camera 3, which established the location outside the restricted gate; the access map, which proved the road was public; the legal preservation request from Base Command, and the sealed briefing folder itself, containing the roster that listed Maddox, Raines, and Doyle as attendees under Colonel Hale's command. Internal Affairs did not have to guess what happened. It had to organize what had already been captured. Maddox sat in a conference room with his union representative, his jaw locked and his hands folded too tightly on the table. Across from him sat Captain Doyle, an Internal Affairs lieutenant, the city attorney's representative, and a military legal liaison from Fort Redstone. A screen on the wall displayed the timeline: 8:39, cruiser begins following truck; 8:41, truck stops safely; 8:42, body camera activation delay noted; 8:43, identification presented; 8:45, plate clear, license clear, no warrants; 8:46, Maddox reports possible misuse of military identification; 8:48, Marcus offers base verification; 8:52, Maddox removes official folder; 8:56, Marcus restrained without documented safety threat; 8:58, Captain Doyle orders no further handling of documents; 8:59, folder opened despite instruction; 900, Fort Redstone personnel arrive and verify identity. The timeline looked simple. That was what made it devastating. Maddox tried to argue that the stop was based on officer instinct. The Internal Affairs lieutenant asked him to identify the specific violation that justified continued detention after the license, registration, and plate came back clear. Maddox said the vehicle was near restricted access. The military legal liaison displayed the jurisdiction map showing the truck was still on public county road. Maddox said Marcus had acted evasive. Raines's body camera played Marcus calmly stating his destination, purpose, and verification option. Maddox said the military identification required suspicion. Dana Brooks's call log showed repeated attempts to reach Marcus while his phone sat on the roof where Maddox had placed it. Maddox said the folder looked questionable. The roster page appeared on the screen with Maddox's own name printed among the officers scheduled to attend Colonel Hale's briefing. No one in the room needed to raise a voice. The evidence did the work. By the end of the first review, Maddox was placed on unpaid administrative suspension for misconduct, false radio reporting, failure to follow supervisor instruction, improper handling of official federal materials, unjustified escalation, and conduct unbecoming an officer. His badge and duty weapon were secured according to department procedure. His patrol access was revoked. His pending reports were frozen for audit. His prior complaints, once marked inconclusive, were reopened under a new civil rights and professional standards review. Raines was also placed on administrative review for failure to intervene, though his cooperation and body camera record were noted. He kept his badge for the moment, but he lost the comfort of pretending silence had been neutral. The department issued a public statement that afternoon, but this time it did not hide behind vague language. It confirmed that Colonel Marcus Hale had been lawfully driving on a public road, that his identity and military credentials were valid, that he had been released without charge, that the involved officer had been suspended, and that all footage and radio logs were preserved for investigation. Fort Redstone released its own statement, shorter and colder, confirming that official materials had been recovered, that Colonel Hale remained in command, and that future interagency cooperation would require documented accountability from all participating agencies. The public did not need much more. Nora's video had already spread through local news, veteran groups, neighborhood pages, and military families across Huntsville. People watched not because there was chaos, but because there was calm. A black veteran stood in cuffs and still sounded more professional than the officer accusing him. That contrast became the truth no department could spin away. Within 2 weeks, the formal findings were complete. Maddox had violated traffic stop policy, body camera activation policy, truthfulness standards, evidence handling rules, de-escalation requirements, bias-related conduct guidelines, and supervisory directives. The city attorney referred the case for civil rights review because the language and pattern of prior complaints raised serious concerns about discriminatory enforcement. The state certification board received a decertification referral, meaning Maddox's ability to work as a law enforcement officer elsewhere would be challenged. After the disciplinary hearing, he was terminated. Not transferred. Not quietly reassigned. Terminated. His badge number was retired from active roster use pending audit. His name was removed from the Fort Redstone briefing attendance list and placed instead into the case file used to teach what not to do. The consequences did not stop with him. The black college student whose car had been searched months earlier received a formal apology and was invited to submit a full statement. The retired nurse who had been followed from the pharmacy was contacted by an investigator who admitted her complaint had been closed without adequate review. The delivery driver near the industrial park finally saw the missing first minutes of his stop searched for in system archives. Maddox's past did not vanish because he lost his job. It returned because Marcus's case gave old victims a door that had been locked when they first knocked. Captain Doyle also faced discipline, though not the kind that made easy headlines. He was removed from patrol oversight during the review, ordered into command accountability training, and formally reprimanded for failing to escalate repeated complaints. The reprimand stayed in his personnel file. More importantly, he had to sit in a room with Fort Redstone leadership and explain why a man with 3 prior warning signs had been allowed to represent the department at a briefing about conduct standards. Doyle did not have a proud answer. That was part of the payoff too. Systems are not fixed only by punishing the loudest man. They are fixed by making the quieter enablers answer for what their silence allowed. Marcus was cleared before the day ended. Cleared was almost the wrong word, because he had never done anything that required clearing. Still, the official record mattered. It stated that he was not charged, not cited, not suspected of impersonation, not in unauthorized possession of documents, and not responsible for the escalation. His military identification was logged as valid. His folder was returned after being dried, copied, and documented for condition. His truck was released. His father's challenge coin was photographed only because Marcus requested that the record show it had been handled unnecessarily, then placed back in its cloth pouch. At 1500 hours, the interagency briefing still happened, delayed by only 30 minutes. Marcus walked into the Fort Redstone briefing room in full uniform, not because he needed the room to respect him, but because the lesson deserved clarity. Officers from county police, city police, military police, and base security sat in rows, quieter than they would have been that morning. Raines sat near the back, pale but present, temporarily reassigned to administrative duty pending review. Maddox's chair was empty. On the screen behind Marcus was not Nora's viral video, not the most humiliating image, not a freeze frame meant to shame. It was a timeline. Marcus faced the room and said, a lawful stop can become unlawful one choice at a time. A professional contact can become misconduct one sentence at a time. And a uniform loses honor the moment it becomes a tool for pride instead of service. No one shifted. No one checked a phone. Marcus continued, my rank did not make me worthy of dignity. My service record did not make me worthy of truth. My command did not make me worthy of lawful treatment. I was worthy before any of that was known. So is every driver you stop. The payoff was not that Maddox was humiliated. It was that his power was stripped away by the exact record he thought he could control. He lost the badge, the cruiser, the radio, the protection of vague reports, the benefit of ignored complaints, and the future he expected to carry into another department. Marcus regained his documents, his name, his command, and the public truth that he had done nothing wrong. But more than that, he forced an entire room of officers to sit with the lesson Maddox had created by failing it. Authority without discipline is not strength. It is liability waiting for evidence. The changes began the next morning in places Maddox never thought his roadside decisions could reach. At the Huntsville County Police Precinct, the same briefing room where officers had once joked about Fort Redstone now sat quiet under the weight of a new policy binder labeled Traffic Stop Accountability, Veteran Identification, and Interagency Conduct. Captain Doyle stood at the front without the confidence he used to borrow from silence. Behind him, a screen showed no faces, no viral clip, no public humiliation for entertainment. It showed a timeline, a jurisdiction map, and a list of decisions that had turned a lawful roadside encounter into misconduct. Every officer in the room had to read the new rule aloud during training. When military identification is presented near Fort Redstone, verification must be requested through the proper channel before suspicion is escalated. When a driver is compliant, restraint must be justified by clear safety factors, not attitude. When a supervisor gives an order over recorded radio, no officer may reinterpret it through pride. It sounded procedural, but everyone understood the deeper meaning. The department was no longer allowed to hide behind vague words like instinct, evasive, and non-compliant when the cameras told a different story. Dispatch changed too. Cheryl Klein's incident flag became the model for a new review system. Any traffic stop involving claims of impersonation, military credentials, racial profiling, or disputed compliance now triggered automatic preservation of body camera, dash camera, radio traffic, and computer-aided dispatch notes. No more waiting for a complaint to survive 3 desks before someone saved the evidence. No more temporary recordings disappearing because a supervisor decided the story sounded uncomfortable. The system would hold the record before the record could be softened. At Fort Redstone, Colonel Marcus Hale required every interagency officer to attend a new command session before being approved for work near base access roads. He did not let the class become a lecture about one bad cop. He made it about standards. Military police sat beside county deputies. City officers sat beside base security. Legal officers explained jurisdiction lines. Veterans described how often their service was doubted until it became useful to someone else. A black delivery driver stood up and told the room that Maddox had once searched his van for 20 minutes because he said the man looked nervous. A retired nurse spoke about being followed from a pharmacy after buying medication for her husband. A college student described being told his car looked too expensive for him. Each story was recorded, reviewed, and attached to reopened complaint files. For the first time, those people were not treated like background noise. They were treated like witnesses to a pattern. Kyle Raines returned to duty months later, but not unchanged. His administrative review found that he had failed to intervene early enough, even though his body camera and later testimony helped expose the truth. He received a suspension, mandatory training, and a permanent note in his file. More important than the discipline was what he did afterward. At his first session with new recruits, he stood in front of the class and said, "Silence is not neutral when your partner is wrong." His voice shook when he said it, but he said it anyway. The recruits remembered that more than any slide in the presentation. Captain Doyle kept his rank, but lost command over patrol until he completed leadership review. For the first time in years, he personally called every complainant whose case had been closed under his supervision. Some hung up. Some cried. Some were too tired to believe anything would change. Doyle accepted that. Accountability did not require applause. It required the uncomfortable work of returning to people who had been dismissed and admitting that the department had protected its comfort more than their truth. In the community, Nora Whitaker became known as the woman at Pump 4, though she always rejected the attention. She said she had only done what anyone should do when a calm person was being turned into a suspect by a louder one. Her video pushed the City Council to fund a public witness education program, teaching people how to record safely, preserve evidence, and provide statements without interfering. The gas station placed a small sign near the door, "Public safety includes public accountability." Marcus never asked for a parade, and he refused every interview that tried to turn him into a symbol larger than the lesson. He returned to base work, command meetings, long reports, phone calls from his daughter, and quiet drives in his father's truck. But the road changed. Officers slowed down before making assumptions near the access corridor. Drivers who presented military identification were verified instead of mocked. Dispatchers asked clearer questions. Supervisors responded faster. Complaint files no longer vanished under the word inconclusive without a second review. The change was not perfect. No policy can remove every prejudice from every heart. But policy can make prejudice easier to catch, harder to excuse, and more expensive to protect. That was the victory Marcus cared about. Not that Maddox lost his badge, though he had earned that consequence. Not that the department was embarrassed, though embarrassment had finally forced honesty. The victory was that the next black veteran, the next young driver, the next nurse, the next student, the next tired citizen pulled onto a wet shoulder would face a system with more cameras saved, more supervisors alert, more partners willing to speak, and fewer places for a false report to hide. Marcus had not won only for himself. He had turned one roadside humiliation into a standard that could stand guard for people he would never meet. Marcus Hale drove through the Fort Redstone gate at sunset with both hands relaxed on the wheel of his father's old black pickup, the same truck that had sat on the roadside under flashing lights, the same truck that now rolled forward under a slow salute from the gate guard. The day had stretched into weeks, and the weeks had changed the road behind him, but the evening light made everything feel quiet again. The folder that had been mishandled in the rain was dry now, copied, logged, and placed in a new sleeve on the passenger seat. The challenge coin rested back in its cloth pouch inside the center console. His wrists no longer carried marks, but memory did not need marks to remain. He passed the fence line, the training field, the low brick buildings, and the flag moving gently above headquarters. No sirens. No shouting. No one trying to make him prove he belonged. Just the steady rhythm of a base returning to order. When he parked outside his office, he sat for a moment before turning off the engine. His phone showed a message from his daughter Naomi, "Proud of you, Dad. Not because you had power. Because you used it right." Marcus read it twice. Then he looked at the photograph clipped to his visor, a faded picture of his father standing beside the same truck years ago, one hand on the hood, face serious, eyes kind. Elijah Hale had taught him that dignity was not something the world handed over willingly. It was something a person carried even when others tried to strip the setting bare. Marcus touched the edge of the photograph, then stepped out into the evening. The air smelled of cut grass, wet pavement, and distant pine. Across the training field, a group of young officers and cadets were finishing drill practice, their voices low, their movements disciplined in the orange light. One of them, a young black cadet named Aaron Fields, noticed Marcus and hurried over, stopping at a respectful distance. "Sir." Marcus turned. "Yes, cadet." Aaron hesitated, then asked the question with the honesty of someone still learning what strength should look like. "How did you stay so calm that day?" Marcus looked beyond him toward the flag. The easy answer would have been training. The complete answer was heavier. He thought of Maddox, of Raines finally speaking, of Nora recording from Pump 4, of Dana arriving without theatrics, of every person whose complaint had been reopened because one stop had been caught clearly enough to matter. Because anger would have made the story about my reaction, Marcus said. The truth needed room to show his conduct. Aaron absorbed that. Were you not angry? Marcus gave a small, tired smile. Of course I was angry. Calm is not the absence of anger. Calm is deciding anger will not drive. The cadet nodded slowly, as if the sentence might stay with him longer than the drill commands. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder for one brief moment. Remember this. Respect should never depend on a uniform. But power should always answer to dignity. Later, after the field emptied and the base lights came on one by one, Marcus walked into his office and placed the dried folder on his desk beside Naomi's photograph. He did not frame the newspaper article. He did not keep Nora's video open on his screen. He did not need trophies from humiliation. Instead, he opened the next briefing file, the one for continued training with local departments, and wrote a single note at the top: protect the person before you protect the institution. Outside, Route 18 faded into dusk beyond the base fence, the road no longer just a place where a man had been wronged, but a place where a standard had been born. Marcus turned off the office light, locked the door, and walked back toward the truck under the American flag. The world had not become perfect. It never does after one case, one firing, or one apology. But somewhere, a dispatcher would save the audio sooner. A partner would speak before silence became complicity. A supervisor would read the whole complaint instead of closing the file. A young officer would remember that a calm black driver on a wet roadside might not be hiding guilt at all. He might be carrying discipline, history, service, and a name the system has not bothered to learn yet. Marcus started the truck and drove slowly down the base road as the sky turned deep blue. His father's keychain swung beneath the ignition, steady with each turn. Justice had not erased the insult, but it had kept the insult from becoming the final word. And for Marcus Hale, that was healing enough for one evening.